Just back from the ITExpo. Fort Lauderdale. It's the Tech Super Show, also the MSP Expo show. It's in, like I mentioned, Fort Lauderdale in the big convention center, the Broward County Convention Center. It's my fourth year going. I brought the podcast, obviously, this year. I had great interviews, great discussions. I started off with Colin Bunyard, great conversation with him, Dan Gribble as well. Joshua Liberman, who's one of our past MSP 555 winners, Corey Kirkendall, Morgan Hines. Great to talk to Morgan. And lastly was Jill Schaffenlaffel. I don't think I pronounced that correctly, Jill. I apologize, but incredible security professional. She used to be with the Department of Defense. The event was, I was mainly there for the great Channel-Wise, Catherine Rose Coaching Cafe, where I got to talk to different people attending about just general coaching issues. But these are the interviews from that event, and they were great guests, and I love talking with them. Thanks so much for listening and watching.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. I found myself at 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. I took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People ask me, how'd you do it? What's the secret? I need to lose weight. How'd you do it? How did I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others.
What is hitchhiking?
What is hitchhiking?
Tell me what it is.
Well, hitchhiking is the world's greatest way to get a ride, to learn about people, and to find out information along the way and about your destination you would otherwise never know.
So it's not all about getting to a destination. It's
for
more.
me, it wasn't. For the most part, it wasn't. I went to see a girl once for New Year's Eve in 1979, and I got from Northwest Colorado to Central Connecticut in 54 hours, which was 2 hours faster than the Greyhound. And that was about the destination. But other than that, no.
Say that again, please. Colorado. So I'm from Connecticut.
Okay.
All the way to Connecticut in 54 hours. How many different rides?
Approximate? Maybe a dozen. It wasn't that many.
Truck drivers? Trucks?
None of those were trucks. It takes a while to pick up rides in a truck stop because you have to get to know the driver and develop a rapport. And back then I didn't have a CDL. Later in my career of hitching, I did. That made it quick. But at this time, I left from Rangeley, Colorado, northwest corner, and got to North Haven, Connecticut. So you know where New Haven is.
I'm from Wallingford. Yeah,
okay.
Very
you know
well.
where it is.
Yes.
Yeah, I looked at the bus ride would have gotten me in at 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and I thought I could beat that. So I did. I
so
got
you're in
in
the
at 4
highway.
p.m.
You're lifting your thumb up?
Yeah, a lot of times there are signs involved. I was a sign master. I would carry signs that had, like, I would place one with a question and then hold one with the answer 100 feet away, or I would, if it was really hot or really cold, I would post the temperature.
Wow.
All kinds of things.
So I was saying you'd have a written sign.
A written sign.
You
well,
wrote on it with
printed.
a marker or something while you were hitchhiking.
It's not as simple as that, but yeah. Yeah, I really was. Signs were my thing.
Do you want to connect with business leaders and engage consumers who take action? The Joey Pinz podcast delivers high-impact conversations to an audience of decision makers, entrepreneurs, and professionals across multiple industries. A fast-growing audience of highly engaged listeners, both B2B and B2C. Millions of listens and views across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Brands that sponsor us see real engagement, conversations, and brand loyalty. Whether you're looking to sell a service, promote a product, or establish thought leadership, our sponsorships offer premium ad placements, exclusive episode sponsorships, full season branding, and event partnerships. Don't just advertise, become part of the conversation. Visit us at joeypinz.com/sponsor to get started, or email us at sales@joeypinz.com. Joey Pinz Podcast, where thought leaders, brands connect.
And you went around the world?
Well, I hitched across Africa in the mid-'80s by mistake because I went to do a job taking a boat around from what was Ethiopia's seacoast, which is another country now, to Senegal, where we were supposed to deliver the boat, or to the coast anyway, over there. And that fell apart because the guy I was supposed to do it with thought the work was too hard, and his folks came and picked him up in the family jet. So I couldn't do that alone. So I ended up having to hitch across the center of the Sahel, which is about 5,000 to 6,000 miles. It's not like it looks on a map. And then
That's
in
double the
Southeast
size of
Asia,
the U.S.
It is. Nobody realizes that because as North Americans, we're used to seeing the map projection that makes Africa look remarkably small and exaggerates things as you move away from the center of the earth, where we put Africa on our particular projection.
Wow.
I can't think of any of that projection right now, but anyway, yes, it's really far. There is no one road that goes 500 miles, much less across the continent. And there were no maps, there were no GPS, and there were no cell phones.
Was some of the hitchhiking on animals?
No.
It was all vehicles?
Really? I rode a couple of camels, but that wasn't really to get places go a mile or two and talk with people. The good news was back then I still had some Arabic, and French was very good.
Right.
And between those two languages, I had 80% of the travel covered.
And no English?
No, my English was good.
But to get across Africa?
Yeah, there were certainly people that spoke English because a lot of people were traders or travelers.
Right.
Absolutely, but maybe 20%.
French and Arabic.
Yeah, heavier on the French than the Arabic because my French was fluent and my Arabic was broken. Still is.
Did you hitchhike in Asia?
I did in Southeast Asia only. So that was Vietnam, Cambodia, and technically Laos, but we were walking at that point, and I didn't know we had crossed the border. A lot of Americans think that borders have signs and checkpoints and more, and there are a lot of borders where people don't see them the way we do. If their family lives on both sides of a given border, or their ethnicity, their clan, whatever, is spread out, they don't think of it as countries, and nobody checks them because everybody knows them from that region. Wow. So we went into Laos, which I don't believe I should have, as an American at that time, without knowing it. And then I noticed that nobody spoke French for the most part, which they do in Cambodia and Vietnam back then. And also it wasn't the same language I was trying to figure out, and it turns out it was Laotian.
Wow.
So there you go.
And the difference between the acceptance of hitchhikers between the U.S., Africa, and Southeast Asia is?
Well, first of all, in the United States, you do hitchhike with your thumb or a sign, or by going to truck stops and talking people up. In Africa at that time, you hitchhike by talking to people. You really wouldn't stand with a thumb out. And by the way, in some Semitic and other Arabic-speaking countries, your thumb out is the rough equivalent of your middle finger, so you have to know what you're doing there.
That's right, the thumbs up. Yeah.
So it's not the same, but in Southeast Asia, it was all about friendships and relationships and getting referrals. So a little business going on. Honestly, it really depends a lot, and there are places where it's maybe not common anymore, but in the States it was very common. I wasn't inventing anything except maybe some of the sign work. Eventually I picked up a walkie-talkie and started using that to hitchhike too, by starting conversations with drivers. So that was probably an innovation at its time. But it's hard to know. There isn't a trade journal, and I don't guess I can prove that I was the first to do any of this.
And did you pay any of these people?
Sure, there were times when I would pay them one way. I mean, there was money exchanged occasionally once I had a CDL, my time driving to give somebody 4 hours to do logbooks
Certified
or sleep.
driver, by the way, CDL.
Commercial driver's license.
Driver, yes.
That was worth a lot. but it was tricky. There's more to being a driver than just having a CDL, and there are logbooks to be kept, and you can only work with independent drivers. Nobody who works for a major trucking company is going to let somebody drive for them, but independent guys would. So that was better than money for most of them because they could sleep or catch up on notes or whatever, the logbooks or the book of lies, as they used to call them.
When's the last time you hitchhiked?
1999.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the last time.
And is it practice still today?
I will occasionally see people hitchhiking in the States, and I've picked them up.
Whoa.
In Europe, I've picked up many, much to Heidi's chagrin at times. On the other hand, we've met really interesting people, and I'm good with languages, so we learn a little new language, we practice, and it's very cool. And I've taken people to places they didn't know were out there. I was repaying the favor. I mean, I've rid with other people at least 100,000 miles, so I still owe a few miles back.
My father was a welder, and he had a pickup truck, and we would go to jobs, and there'd be hitchhikers. And my father would pull over, and he'd say, get in the back. And the hitchhiker would get in the back, and I was, what's happening? And then we get to our destination. Sometimes the guy would knock, because he was behind. He wasn't in the same cabin.
Yeah.
And that's the extent. But it's a lost art. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. That keeps coming to mind. That book by Douglas Adams.
Douglas Adams.
Yes.
The number is 42, by the way.
42. Yeah. The most important possession is a towel.
I got married on 10/10/10, October 10th of 2010. Which my wife put together and figured out why I chose that date. However, if you convert that from binary to decimal, that's 42. So she didn't know that part. And once I explained to her, she was pretty unimpressed.
How did you get into rock and ice climbing?
A lot of stuff in my life is like this. I was afraid of heights. So I figured the best option for a guy who was afraid of heights was to climb rock. And I became a martial artist because I got beat up a lot and I was afraid of fighting. And I'm just about everything. I've either shied away from it or I've just tackled it head on. So I was interested in that. And I love rock. I literally love rock. I just love rock formations, the rock chemistry, geology, geomorphology. So it was all interesting to me. And there's no better way to appreciate it than to put your life in its hands.
One of your attractions to Albuquerque?
Well,
it's rock. I mean, right?
Is,
you guys are high up in the air over there.
Well, we're at a mile high. We're not a good marketing city, so Denver got that
Denver
one.
stole that.
But we're actually, my house is at, I think, 5,270 feet. So I'm about 10 feet short of a mile high, but I have a roof.
That's good.
Yeah, I guess Albuquerque was about the quality of light. I was a photographer even then.
That's right.
It was the landscape. It was the pace of life, even the food, everything about it, including the rock and the mountains. The north third of New Mexico is somewhere between 8,000 and 13,000 feet. The middle third is somewhere between 4,000 and 7,000 feet where I live. And then the bottom third of the state, I think a low point is still over 3,000 feet high.
Wow.
So the whole state is elevated.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Wow. And when you say rock and ice climbing, what's ice climbing?
So ice climbing is the most ethereal thing you can do in that realm because ice is constantly changing. You can literally climb the same ice 2 hours apart and it's not the same ice. You've heard that phrase, you can't step into the same river twice.
Right.
You cannot climb the same ice twice. There are hundreds of words for different types of ice. There are dozens of words for similar ice depending on its color, which is often driven by temperature and physical components, the constituency of the ice. And every one of them take different techniques, different tools, and different way of seeing the world. So ice is phenomenal, but always very challenging and far more risky than most climbing.
Can you do ice climbing in Albuquerque?
Very close. I learned within 100 miles, and we used to get ice reliably right outside of town in the sand dunes. That's not a thing that I know of anymore, but to be honest, I haven't been on ice in 40 years, so I can't speak to the current state of that.
So you're afraid of heights, and you say the best way to battle that is start climbing walls, climbing rock.
Yeah, and walls too. When I started going to Italy in my late 20s, early 30s, I discovered a love of climbing fortresses, fortezza. So at first I thought I was really hot shit because I was climbing 30, 40 feet, coming over the top, attacking the inside, which usually meant, buying ice cream. But I thought, how could it have been so hard for these guys to climb these castles, right? I'm free soloing these little puppies in 5 minutes. And somebody pointed out, yeah, but you're not wearing 60 pounds of armor and there's no boiling oil and arrows involved. It's like, okay, oh yeah. Yeah. But so, I was still pretty good at climbing the rock, but it was different.
What is it about Italy you like?
There is something called La Dolce Vita di Far Niente. So the sweet life of doing nothing, basically. And it's not my nature to not be doing something. And there's only a few places in the world where I do that. La Dolce Vita di Far Niente. So anyway, I learned how to unwind and how to slow down. Probably for the first time in my life there when I was about 30. Since then, there are certain islands, which is Heidi's thing, that help me do that. Key Calker off of Belize is a good example. But it was also, to be honest with you, the women, the wine,
of course,
the song.
Yeah.
Of course, indeed.
Yeah.
Your brand deserves to be in front of the right audience decision makers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ready to take action. That's exactly who listens to the Joey Pinz podcast. Thousands of engaged business leaders and consumers tune in every week. Millions of views and listens across YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Sponsors see real impact, higher engagement, brand trust, and conversations. We offer strategic partnerships tailored to your goals, including targeted ad placements, branded guest appearances, multi-episode and event sponsorships. Make your brand part of the conversation. Let's grow together. Visit joeypinz.com/sponsor to explore sponsorship opportunities, or email us at sales@joeypinz.com. The Joey Pinz podcast, where brands and thought leaders connect.
Did you force to slow down, or did you witness it and did it yourself?
I certainly didn't have to force it.
Right.
That is what I have to do in my everyday life.
Right.
No, it was just something that happened. I stopped planning the next few days at a time. Then I got better at it, and I stopped planning the next few hours at a time. And then I discovered that you can go to dinner early, which in Italy is 7 or 7:30, and be there late. I started meeting people at the other tables. We once in Nice sat in a central table in a small place with 6 tables, and I had 5 or 6 languages, and it was just enough that every single table around us, we could all talk to each other because there were enough common languages between each table, and that was like a 12-language, 4-hour, 6-bottle night. And I was there with Heidi, actually. And
Heidi's your wife.
She is now. At the time, she was still evaluating me. But it was spectacular. We had people from all over Europe, South America, and North Africa, and it was the best thing. And at the end, the owner of the restaurant came out and he brought all of the unfinished bottles of wine that they had collected off tables that night, and we all sat and talked, and it was an amazing night, and it was the most exhausted I've been because of the mental effort of all the languages, but because also of opening up to so many people from so many different cultures.
Right.
Yeah, it was really something.
So the 5 languages, English, Arabic, French.
Well, I don't speak Arabic anymore. In the past, Russian, Arabic, and Farsi. And today, good French, good Spanish, good Italian, maybe fluent still in Italian. My English is quite good.
Yeah.
And German was good when I was younger. It's still okay. And I've left out a couple I'm just beginning to pick up now.
Allora parla italiano bene tu.
Sì, la mia ragazza ex mi ha insegnato a parlare 35 anni fa. She was an American girl with a family from Naples and Sicily, and we did traveling together in Italy. But I traveled enough and did enough that my Italian got really pretty fluent.
It gets there quicker. My father would send me as a kid, and nobody spoke English, so you get submersed in it, and that's it. You just pick it up.
My parents did a couple of things for me by mistake when I was young, not knowing how good it was for me. But when my mother finally went to work and we weren't poor anymore, I was about 4 or 5, they brought in a woman who I guess was a nanny. She lived in the house and helped raise us, my brother, who was very young, and myself. And she was Swiss, so she spoke German, French, and Italian, and Romanche. But she spoke English, but she didn't like it. So from the age of 4 to 5 or 5.5, I spoke those languages with her, and she would mix them up in the same sentence sometimes. It was really something. But then when I started going to school, I had an accent. So not only did I get an early exposure to languages, I learned how to fight because every kid wants to beat on the kid that's different.
Yeah. Should everybody do a martial art? Should everybody have that?
Honestly, if there are 3 things you can do for your kids, if you can get them into the martial arts and make sure that they learn at least one other language, and then make sure that they know when to question authority. Those are the 3 greatest things anybody can learn.
When did you learn those 3?
Wow. My parents were highly authoritarian, so I learned that from an early age.
I see.
Martial arts they were against. I had to sneak around behind their back. So I was about 14 when I started and about 16 when I was competent. And
Which
the languages all my
Which
life.
martial art?
The first martial arts for me was judo, then jiu-jitsu, and then in my 20s it was Shotokan. My 30s, back to jiu-jitsu before it was called Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then in my 40s it was Taekwondo, which is Korean karate, basically.
Yeah. The advancement of martial arts in the recent years has been incredible. There's so many more opportunities to pursue.
Yeah, there's a lot more awareness of it. You're not a fringe guy. Martial arts 40 years ago was kind of like yoga was 20 years ago, where people knew it was a thing, but they didn't get it. So, and maybe I'm dating myself, but now I would say that there isn't anybody you run into in America anyway that doesn't have a concept of what the martial arts are, which is different from understanding them.
Yeah. What is the difference between understanding and knowing what it is?
Well, I think a lot of people assume you study martial arts to learn how to fight. And
Right.
the reality is, if you're good at it and you focus, you study martial arts to learn how not to have to fight.
The opposite.
Yeah.
All my martial artist friends are calm, and they're not. Yeah, you would think it's I know how to, choke somebody. I'm going to go ahead and do it all the time. It's the complete opposite.
Yeah. Because of other stuff in my life, I learned more than just martial arts, real combat. And anybody who's had that experience will do nearly anything not to have that experience again.
Right. Because so many things can go wrong that's out of your control.
Doesn't matter how fast you are, how good you are, how strong you are, what size you are, you can lose any fight.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I just heard a quote somebody told me. It's not the big that eats the small, it's the fast that eats the slow.
Yeah, if I was lucky to be born fast. Nobody's born with technique. And I was lucky to be strong for my size. But the reality is the only thing a great physical stature buys you is a reduction in the likelihood that somebody wants to start a fight. But it doesn't give you any advantage in a fight that I've been aware of. And I know that very personally.
Siberian Huskies.
Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful animals.
Yep.
What's the attraction?
Well, I was exposed to one in my early 30s, I think, late 20s, early 30s. I used to run a lot in the park near my home, Hidden Park, and there was a couple that were out there playing and running all the time, and they always wanted to challenge me. And in high school, I was like, I think it was 10-1 or 10-2, 100 runner, real fast sprinter, and these dogs could just smoke me off. I mean, they were smart enough to wait till I was 20 yards or so out and then just burn me. And that was interesting to me. There are faster dogs, but there are no more dogs that are more beautiful while being fast. Yeah. They were also smart and clever. They talked and communicated. Just everything about them was fabulous. I just loved the dogs. So I think we've raised 6 or 8 now in waves of 2 to 4 at a time. Wow. Yeah, and I have a 60-pounder who's pushing 14 in a month or two, and I have a smaller 35-pounder now that she's 18 now, and
18 years old.
She doesn't have any obvious end of the runway at this point, although you often don't know. Yeah, I had no idea they could last this long, and it's fantastic. She's still happy and healthy and jumpy and runny.
Aren't you supposed to multiply by 7 or something if there's a human years?
That's generally speaking, that's what people say. It really depends on the size and the breed.
I'd say.
There are many dogs that don't last 10 years, breeds. I would say that If you look at your typical 40-pound dog, that number is probably more accurately 6
see.
or 7. But 80-pound dog, it's probably 5 or 6.
less,
And you get
yeah.
bigger. A lot of 100-pound dogs don't live
They don't
10
live.
years. So, 5 to 7 is the multiple I would use.
And what's the difference between a Siberian Husky and other Huskies?
Well, Arjun, but Siberians are typically the smallest breed that are called Huskies.
see.
And then there are Alaskan Huskies, which are the next size up. They're Siberians run typically 40 to 60 pounds. Alaskans maybe up to 100. But then there are Malamutes, which people confuse, and they straddle the middle to the high end of that. They're all very similar, but there are characteristics of the Siberian, such as intelligence and talkativeness. They all howl, but talkativeness. I used to come home and have Tasha tell me about her whole day for 3 minutes at a time, and God, I wish I could have followed what she said.
Wow.
Yeah, she was phenomenal.
Now, wolves will actually howl because they're taking, as I understand it, taking roll. And once they realize that numbers are down, they'll start breeding.
You know,
Is that correct?
I don't know if it's correct. I've read many things. You know, I've always had an interest in the north, the cold, and working dogs from there. I know that some people believe exactly that. I don't have enough direct exposure to give you an intelligent answer. It appears to me that they do with their howling a lot of what we did with storytelling and with clan gatherings. That's what it feels like to me. And I don't see as much of that. I mean, wolves are obviously not Huskies or Alaskans for that matter. But I see that communications and emotional stuff from Siberians more. If you get closer and closer to wolves, such as Malamutes or maybe Alaskan Huskies, then it seems more like wolf communications.
Amazing. Joshua, has there been anything in the last month or so that you changed your mind on?
Anything what?
You changed your mind on
In my life?
in the last month?
In the last month. Wow. Sure. Who sponsors you? Or can
Nobody
I
does. Nobody
speak freely?
sponsors. Don't worry.
All right. Well, if you want to talk about within the industry or
Anything.
Anything. Wow. So it feels like we've underestimated the value and the importance of education as a world and as a nation, and that's been challenging. It's not that I ever myself underestimated, I think, but I didn't realize just how fundamental that was. The ability to reason and the ability to cut through the noise and the resistance to manipulation. I think that's really dropped dramatically, not just in our society. I see it around the world because I travel a lot and I read constantly, and I am very disappointed by that. So I would say that at one time I thought that education was something that we could do individually, and I've really done it myself. I have linguistics and philosophy degrees, but I consider myself self-educated because most of what I needed to know was stuff I did on my own, especially in the IT industry. I used to think that formal education was less important, and I think now that it's quite a bit more. And I don't mean college necessarily. I mean teaching people to reason and to think.
To deduce, to reason. But so you changed your mind on what? On it used to be important, but it's not?
No, the opposite. What I believed was that we could educate ourselves, and I think I got lucky. I was the son of a teacher and a very smart mother on top of that. And I read constantly. I was exposed to languages, travel, and culture from my early, and especially through my teens. And I think I just got lucky. So I thought everybody else would too.
I see.
And I just didn't think that formal education was that important. And it may be what's really changed is the nature of that formal education. But reasoning is, I just don't see that much of it right now happening, and it's critical.
It is critical. So I started my MSP in the 90s. I'm not sure if I told you this story, but I was working way too hard. I was working 16-hour days. You're no stranger to this. And putting my health in the back seat and sitting in front of the doctor, and I'm at 340 pounds. And she says to me, if I don't lose this weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born. Scared the hell out of me, right? So I'm driving home, upset with myself. How did I let this happen? Spent the next 6-7 months, lost 130 pounds. You can't look at it as a finishing line with losing weight. It's lifelong changes. But I tell this story and people say, how'd you do it? What's your secret? And there's no secret. Discipline. That's how I lost. I had motivation. I got routine, etc. How does discipline play a role in your life?
Wow. So it's crucial and central, and honestly, it's probably the only real natural advantage that I was born with, I think. I am
natural advantage.
I think so. I think some people are just more disciplined and less distracted than others. And I won't pretend that I wasn't distracted chasing girls for 20 years. Heidi finally shook me of that. But we met when I was 37, so I had a long runway. It took me a long time to get past, but in general, when I set my mind to something, I will achieve it, and I have to be careful what it is that I wish for. Sometimes I have that, and I have organizational skills. I think it as being meticulous. Heidi describes it as OCD, but I'm not sure.
Tomato.
I'm not sure who's right. But
yeah.
Ultimately, everybody's disciplined at something. Some people are simply disciplined at self-destruction.
Right.
And I've met folks in my life, I think, how do they even have the time to screw up that bad? But the reality is everybody has something, and everybody has some blind spots. So until I was mid-30s, I was a swimsuit model, not literally, by the way.
Still are.
But it took the discipline from that time forward. And part of that was because I started running my business and focusing on it instead of just rock climbing and fighting and all the stuff that honed me. I also had to make a good living at that point. I finally figured it out. I think the fourth girlfriend that dumped me because I was broke was probably the one that did it. And I still know her, by the way.
Good for you. Good for you.
Looking for a powerful way to reach business leaders and engage consumers? The Joey Pinz podcast connects brands like yours with an audience that listens, engages, and takes action. High impact exposure with a fast growing loyal audience. Millions of views and listens across major platforms. Sponsors see increased brand awareness, trust, and conversations. We make sponsorships simple and effective with custom ad placements that fit your brand, deep audience engagement through authentic conversations, long-term exposure across podcast platforms and social media. Don't miss the opportunity to connect with your ideal customers. Visit joeypinz.com/sponsor to secure your sponsorship today. Or you can email us at sales@joeypinz.com. The Joey Pinz podcast, where conversations drive results.
So we are here in Fort Lauderdale. It's the big ITExpo tech show. What are some of your goals here?
Well, one of them was to meet Joey Pinz, so we can check that box.
My pleasure. We've been talking for months, and so now
Nice
we
to
meet
meet
face, yes.
I had a small engagement on a panel this morning, and that was fun. I wanted to experience that here in a different crowd. This is my first ITExpo and only my second event to be associated with MSPAA. So I hadn't had that much of that exposure. There are half a dozen or more folks out here that I know that I wanted to see, and that's happening. There are several more people that are either members of the ASCII community or other ones that I'm in that I'm running into and getting through that and having a good time with that. And I want to sit in on some of these sessions and hear a different viewpoint from people that move in circles that I don't.
Yeah, very, very cool, and it's good for that. You have a lot of different speakers here. It's my fourth year here, and the MSP area is really kind of expanding out. It's really good. I always love talking to you, Josh. We've been talking for months. I really appreciate your time today. Anybody listening and watching and they want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Well, I guess the easiest way is Joshua@netsciences.com. That's plural.
netsciences.com. You're also on LinkedIn.
Yep.
And I'll make sure to put that up. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating.
would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciplined Conversations.